From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. This is Dateline Malacañang in review. Malacañang condemned the violence that marred Sunday's mass protests in Manila, vowing to hold accountable mass agitators it branded as anarchists who hijacked what began as a peaceful demonstration against corruption. In a palace press briefing on Monday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the rally was peaceful but was disrupted by a few who wanted trouble. Castro said President Marcos Jr. respected the people's right to assemble and express anger over irregularities in flood control projects, but warned against groups bent on sowing disorder. The unrest erupted at Ayala Bridge, where demonstrators hurled rocks and bottles, set tires ablaze, and torched a police motorcycle after overturning it. Violence later spread to Mendiola, where protesters clashed with anti-riot police.
Peaceful rally na samahan ng iilang nais manggulo. Mananagot ang lahat. Yan ang nais ni Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. sa lahat ng sinumang gumamit ng karahasan sa naganap na peaceful rally noong linggo. Bilang isang public servant, pinakinggan ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. ang sigaw ng taumbayan. Managot ang lahat ng sangkot. Kaisa ng taumbayan si President Marcos Jr. laban sa korupsyon. Ang Pangulo mismo ang nagpasimula upang maimbestigahan ang maanumalyang flood control projects. Magpapatuloy din ang Pangulo sa naumpisahan na ito at sa tulong ng taumbayan na magiging matapang sa pagbunyag ng katotohanan, ang pang-aabuso sa kaban ng bayan ay mailalantad at malalabanan. Ang Pangulong Marcos Jr. ay handang tumugon sa hiling ng taumbayan, kaya't nirespeto at patuloy na nirespeto ng Pangulo ang karapatang pantao. Hindi siya naging hadlang sa malaking protesta. Naglahad ng galit ang tao laban sa korupsyon. Ngunit, kinukondena ng administrasyong ito at ng Pangulo ang paggamit ng mga kabataan na gawing mga tulisan ng mga grupong itinatago ang mukha sa likod ng itim na maskara. Team itim kung maituturing. Hindi sila rallyista na may lehitimong adhikain laban sa korupsyon, kundi gumawa lang ng kaharasan, magnakaw, manunog, at manira. Hindi kayo makakalagpas sa kamay ng batas at ang mga tao sa inyong likuran na gumamit sa inyo. Mga gahaman sa kapangyarihan. Hindi kayo dapat paligtasin. Hustisya ang uusig sa inyo.
That was Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Malacañang asked the Department of Justice or DOJ and the Philippine National Police or PNP to investigate former Ilocos Sur Governor Luis Chavit Singson for possible inciting to sedition charges after urging students to join a revolution against corruption. In a palace press briefing, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. wants accountability from those who may have incited violence during Sunday's rallies. Castro said Singson allegedly encouraged minors to skip classes to join the protests. The Palace Press Officer said it is up to the DOJ and law enforcement agencies to determine if Singson's remarks fall under inciting to sedition, which is punishable by up to 6 years under the revised Penal Code.
Ang gusto po ng Pangulo ay managot. Ang lahat na maaaring managot at lahat na maaaring sangkot sa marahas na nangyari. Iilan lamang, pero naging marahas ang ilan sa naging rally nitong linggo. So tayo na po ang makikiusap sa pamunuan po, especially kay Secretary John Vic Rimulya, kay Acting PNP Chief General Natartes Jr., and of course sa DOJ, na busisiin mismo ang mga sinabi ni Mr. Chavit Singson. Dahil doon, inakit niya ang mga kabataan, especially high school students, college students, at karamihan dito malamang ay mga minor de edad, upang malaman nila at iniyahan ito na huwag pumasok sa eskwelahan. At habang hindi bumababa ang mga taong gusto nilang pababain. At sila pa, at si Mr. Chavit Singson pa ang nagsabi na hayaan ng mga magulang ang mga batang ito na tumayo para sa isang revolusyon para sa korupsyon. So, dapat maimbestigahan ito upang malaman kung siya ay maaaring makasuhan ng inciting to sedition.
That was Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Monday, Malacañang said Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s aggressive push against corruption is key to protecting the country's investment climate, even as massive anti-corruption protests rocked Metro Manila and other parts of the country over the weekend. Asked about reputational risks from the unrest during a media briefing, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said investors are drawn to leaders who confront corruption head-on. She cited President Marcos Jr.'s unprecedented move to order an investigation into alleged anomalies in flood control projects, even if these occurred under his own administration. Castro stressed that transparency and accountability will bolster investor confidence despite images of street clashes dominating global news.
But anyway, we all know that investors want to invest in countries whose leaders fight corruption, whose leaders are willing to put in jail people who are corrupt. And that is what the President is doing right now. Siya lamang po ang presidente na nagpapaimbestiga ng malawakang anomalya, especially itong flood control projects, kahit sa panahon ng kanyang administrasyon. Wala sino man sa ngayon na nalalaman tayo na pinaimbestigahan niya ang sariling administrasyon. Lahat halos ay nagmamalinis. Pero ang Pangulo ay matapang na lumabas upang ipaalam sa tao ang maaaring pang-aabuso sa kaban ng bayan. So sa tingin natin, with that, we believe na lahat ng investors masahangaan ng Pangulo dahil lumalaban sa korupsyon.
Tens of thousands marched in Metro Manila and several provinces on Sunday to denounce corruption, particularly in the multi-billion-dollar flood control projects. Violence flared at Menjola and Ayala Bridge as mass protesters clashed with police in an attempt to raid Malacañang Palace. The president has created an independent body to probe the anomalies which he first uncovered in his 2025 State of the Nation address.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has signed into law the Republic Act, or RA 12289, or the Accelerated and Reformed Right-of-Way Act, or ARROW Act, which aims to expedite and ensure fairness in the government's acquisition of land for infrastructure projects while providing proper compensation to landowners and affected families. Signed into law on September 12, RA 12289 introduced amendments to several sections of RA 10752, or the Right-of-Way Act of 2016, as well as inserted new sections. The ARROW Act defines national government projects and private entities providing public services, as well as the rules on negotiated sales. The law provides that the appropriate price offer shall be based on the valuation system and schedule of market values or SMV established under RA 12001 or the Real Property Valuation and Assessment Reform Act of 2024. In the absence of an approved SMV, the offer amount must be based on the Bureau of Internal Revenue zonal land valuation and the assessed value of the improvement, including machinery considered as immovable under the new Civil Code in structures, crops, or trees. For untitled lands, the landowner or possessor is required to submit a tax declaration, an affidavit from disinterested residents where the land is located, a real property tax certificate, a certification from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources or DENR, and a property technical description. A new law amended Section 6 of RA 10752 on guidelines for expropriation proceedings, requiring the implementing agency or private entity to deposit to the court 15% of the land's market value upon the filing of a complaint. The deposit also includes 100% replacement cost, including improvement depreciation and 15% market value of crops and trees located within the property. The section on the relocation of informal settlers was also amended, with the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development or DHSUD coordinating with the local government units in establishing and developing resettlement sites for informal settlers. Meanwhile, under the amended Section 10, Public-Private Partnerships or PPP project right-of-way acquisitions shall be in accordance with RA 11966 or the PPP Code of the Philippines of 2023 and its implementing rules and regulations. The compensation for project-affected land structures, improvement, and immovable machinery shall be based on the new Civil Code. Under the amendment Section 12, a private entity violating the provisions of the ARROW Act is held accountable by law, which holds its president, manager, director, trustees, or responsible officers liable for civil and criminal sanctions. The new law also widens the composition of departments mandated to prepare the implementing rules and regulation. Among those included were the secretaries of the Department of Agriculture, Interior and Local Government, Department of Economy, Planning and Development, Agrarian Reform, DENR, and DHSUD. The sections inserted were Section 5 on entry and use of property within ancestral domains, Section 11 on relocation of utilities and facilities owned by utility providers affected by a national government project, Section 15 on applicability of RA 8975 on the expeditious implementation and completion of government infrastructure projects by prohibiting lower courts from issuing temporary restraining orders, Section 16 on guidelines on information sharing and assistance for right-of-way acquisition, Section 17 foreign-assisted projects, and Section 18 on public disclosure of essential right-of-way information.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has issued Executive Order Number 97, which strengthens workers' rights to freely establish unions, join groups, and engage in peaceful, concerted activities without fear of harassment. The decree signed on Monday implements the Omnibus Guidelines on the exercise of freedom of association and civil liberties, which direct government entities to protect workers' rights in accordance with the Constitution and international labor norms. It also addresses the suggestions of the International Labor Organizations or ILO high-level tripartite mission, which expressed concerns about violence, red tagging, and the suppression of trade union rights. The HLTM also recommended immediate and effective actions such as preventing violence related to legitimate union activities, investigating and holding accountable those who commit acts of violence against union members, establishing monitoring bodies, and ensuring that all workers, without distinction, can freely form and join organizations of their choice. To answer the HLTM's recommendation, the President established the Interagency Committee for the Protection of Workers' Freedom of Association and Right to Organize in 2023 to implement all necessary measures to solve the four identified areas of concern. EO 97 requires key agencies such as the Department of Labor and Employment, Department of Justice, Department of National Defense, Department of Trade and Industry, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, and the National Security Council to align their policies and operations with the guidelines. The DOLE, through the National Tripartite Industrial Peace Council, will supervise implementation and compliance, while the Interagency Committee, established in 2023, will give periodic reports to the President's office. Government agencies must also incorporate the standards into their training, operations, and informational materials to ensure consistent application. Local governments and the commercial sector are encouraged to fully cooperate.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang announced Wednesday that Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. will make public appearances this week following a period of absence. Malacañang clarified that there are no security concerns. According to the palace, the President has held private meetings in Malacañang. Presidential Communications Office or PCO Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Claire Castro in a media briefing said that the President will have a busy schedule till Saturday, including public events. When asked if the President's absence from public events was due to security concerns, Castro responded no.
Busy po ang Pangulo sa mga private meeting sa palasyo at sa susunod po hanggang Sabado ay marami po siyang gagawin pong paglabas at magkakaroon po siya ng mga events. So, tignan po natin ang kanyang mga activities sa mga susunod pang mga araw. Wala pong nararamdaman sa kasalukuyan na threat. Of course, maliban lang, sabi nga natin, sa mga nakaraang threat ng Vice Presidente sa kanyang buhay. Sa ngayon po ay wala pong direct threat na nakikita at nararamdaman ng Pangulo at ang gobyerno. At nagkataon lamang po siguro na wala pong activities, pero tingnan po natin. At bibigyan po namin ng ang media advisory kapag ka po maaari na po kayong sumama sa kanyang mga activities.
The chief executive's last known public appearances were on Saturday when he announced the return of 60 billion peso to the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation at the Dr. Jose Fabella Memorial Hospital in Manila and revealed the student beep cards at the Light Rail Transit Line 2.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Wednesday, Malacañang said Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. was outraged by reports of alleged kickbacks in government infrastructure projects and substandard flood control structures in Bulacan Province. In a press briefing, Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said President Marcos Jr. does not condone any form of abuse by erring government workers or their conspirators, including the misuse of public funds. This came after former Public Works Bulacan District Assistant Engineer Bryce Erickson Hernandez at the resumption of the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee hearing on Tuesday admitted that all infrastructure projects were substandard since 2019 due to systemic corruption. Castro said the admission about the substandard flood control projects is really saddening, lamenting that the ones benefiting are only those who are getting richer. During the Senate hearing on Tuesday, controversial contractor Pacifico Curly Discaya also claimed that the kickbacks in government projects have risen to 25 to 30% under the Marcos administration, allegedly lower than the 15% under the Duterte administration and 10% under the Aquino administration. Castro slammed the government officials who are demanding a 30% cut from the infrastructure projects under Marcos' watch, describing them as just overly greedy and never satisfied.
Galit po ang Pangulo sa ganyan. Kaya nga po pinasimulan niya ang pag-iimbestiga na ito. At sa ngayon po nakikita natin kung gaano ba nagiging mapang-abuso ang karaniwang mamamayan at kasabwat ang ilang mga public officials. So, hindi po dapat ipagmalaki na napakalaki na nakikickback o nagiging komisyon ng mga public officials na ito. Kaya po galit ang Pangulo. Wala po nakikita kung ano man dahilan. Siguro sobra lang pong ganid ang mga public officials na ito at walang kabusugan. Kakalungkot na malaman yan. Hindi lamang po ang Pangulo ang malulungkot. Lahat po tayong taong bayan ay malulungkot po sa nakita at nasabing ganyan na kumbaga itong mga proyektong to ay para sa kalahatan, para sa ikagiginhawa ng mga kababayan natin. Pero ang mga gumiginhawa ay yung mga tao lamang na siyang nagpapayaman. Muli, ito po ang ayaw ng Pangulo. Ang budget na inilalaan ay para sa bayan at sa taong bayan. Kaya nga po, nagpasimula ang Pangulo sa pag-iimbestiga ng ganitong mga klaseng korupsyon. Mas maganda rin po sana kung noon pa, nung panahon na hindi pa po ang Pangulo ang nakaupo, napunan na rin po sana nila ang mga ghost projects na yun dahil nakakahiya po talaga.
That was Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
On Thursday, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. expressed dismay over the lack of further progress in addressing the long-standing South China Sea disputes between the Philippines and China. The president cited the stalled development during his farewell meeting with outgoing Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Silian, at Malacañang Palace in Manila. President Marcos Jr. described the continued impasse as unfortunate, acknowledging the importance of dialogue and cooperation to ease tensions and resolve maritime issues in the contested waters. Despite this, President Marcos Jr. recognized Wang's dedication to improve the two nations' relations during his tenure. Wang is a seasoned Chinese diplomat with over 3 decades of experience in foreign affairs. He served as China's ambassador to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, from 2018 to 2019 before his appointment as ambassador to the Philippines. During his time in the Philippines, Wang was involved in numerous high-profile diplomatic engagements amid ongoing tensions over the South China Sea dispute.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Malacañang has directed all concerned government agencies to implement the 2024 National Disaster Response Plan, or NDRP, a strategic plan aimed at ensuring a timely, effective, and coordinated disaster response. Memorandum Circular, or MC 100, signed by Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin on September 23, orders the adoption and implementation of the 2024 NDRP to preserve lives, provide immediate assistance to affected communities, and minimize exacerbation of emergency situations. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, through the Office of Civil Defense, or OCD, was tasked with spearheading the implementation of the 2024 NDRP according to MC 100. National government agencies, including government-owned and controlled corporations, are directed, while LGUs are encouraged to support the implementation of the 2024 NDRP and its related programs. MC 100 mandates close coordination between the OCD and the Presidential Communications Office, or PCO, to ensure the effective dissemination of the 2024 NDRP to all concerned government agencies and offices. The funding requirements for the implementation of the Strategic Disaster Response Plan will be sourced from the existing appropriations of the respective agencies, subject to applicable laws, rules, and regulations. The NDRRMC has recommended the adoption of the 2024 NDRP to provide overall directions to all agencies and networks involved in disaster risk reduction and management, with a particular focus on disaster response. The ultimate goal of the NDRP 2024 is to save lives, ensure immediate assistance to affected communities, and prevent the worsening of emergency situations through a well-established and effective disaster response and early recovery system. MC100 takes effect immediately.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service is live on audio streaming. Just download eVox PBS receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit the Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang in Review. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Jerome Toledo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.